Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Just Open It, the YouTube series in which I open recently acquired toys. My name is Russ. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. After a long hiatus, I have returned to begin opening Masters of the Universe toys exclusively to count down to the release of the Masters of the Universe feature film coming in June. I plan on posting 2 or 3 videos a week between now and then because I have that much stuff to open. So let's dive right in with this Masters of the Universe Origins Sketchbook series He-Man. If I'm going to resume these videos with some regularity, why not start with the guy that started it all in his inaugural incarnation. The Sketchbook series does a great job of capturing some of the character concepts and designs that weren't used in the final versions of these characters back in the 80s. And of course, He-Man went through many revisions as they tried to nail the titular character of this franchise. Mark Taylor is the artist and action figure designer that first put pen to paper on this very design and arguably created He-Man from the very beginning. You know, there are countless YouTube commentators and documentaries at this point that kind of chart the development of Masters of the Universe, so I'm not here to debate those issues. I will say that I believe Mark Taylor, obviously a huge visionary when it came to Masters of the Universe, and his synthesis of barbarianism, that sword and sorcery genre that was kind of starting to wane in the early 80s, and integrating it with the technology that was on the rise in sci-fi movies like Star Wars. Well, I think he had a big hand. I think it's well documented that he did a great job in taking those two kind of boy-driven concepts in toys and media and putting them together to create Masters of the Universe. And here he is, the most powerful man in the universe. The artwork on this packaging is incredible as always, and the choreography of these characters pays homage to some of He-Man's earliest appearances in media, specifically the mini-comics that came with these toys. For the most part. Look at that awesome headshot. That's super cool. And you could see where Mattel is acknowledging in some ways He-Man's connection to, or the inspirations of, Conan the Barbarian. So, I mean, if you wanted to distill Masters to a pedestrian audience, you would basically say, what, Conan meets Star Wars. Those are two kind of broad characters and stories and franchises that a lot of people understand. If you're trying to wrap your head around why this was so popular when it was in such a very finite amount of time, 1981, 1982 to 1987, 1988, and every version of He-Man after that has really been chasing the dragon of this success. So let's just dive right in here before I babble on incoherently any longer. The whole point of this series is to just open these toys and get them on my shelves. Because if I want to enjoy this box art, frankly, I could do so online. All of these images are available online in some way or another. If it's not on the artist's Instagrams, then on, you know, sites that sell toys. So I'm not going to find this packaging super precious in the interest of space in my apartment and just the desire to treat these toys as they should be treated, as tactile pieces of imagination, tools for imagination. But boy, when you remove the figure, look at that awesome, look at those sketches in the back there that were obscured by the toy. And in fact, is there a way to see those even more clearly? Oh, this is like an insert. Oh man, am I keeping this? Ah, oh no. How cool is that? Now, again, these images are homages or swipes from official He-Man imagery that appeared in mini-comics and stuff, but drawn in this essentially unused version of He-Man, this more barbarian look that Mark Taylor nailed. So let me extract the accessories, the swappable head that we'll talk about in a second. Here's my favorite part. Those little plastic bands. Now, because this is a sketchbook series, with an emphasis on the sketches, I wish that Mark Taylor's name was evoked on that packaging. In recent years, as I've been opening more toys, I've discovered that some companies like NECA, however you say it, they do include essentially creators' credits at the bottom of the packaging, which is, in my opinion, frankly, revolutionary when it comes to toys. I mean, as a kid, I never thought that these were first sketches that were then sculpted, and there were prototypes, and you have to think about paint application and stuff. Now, as an adult, I really appreciate those stages and the creativity and the imagination and the ingenuity that goes into all of that. So it would be nice if Mark Taylor and then some of the contemporary contributors that made this possible were credited on the packaging. Again, because you're emphasizing these as a sketchbook series, let's talk about who did the sketching. Anyway, as I'm looking at this figure, it's very interesting to note some of his super distinct features from He-Man. The wrist bands are not your typical kind of rounded gauntlets that hug his forearms. Instead, they're very squared off, which makes them super unique. And I presume a distinct sculpt of the forearms. Yeah, they're on there. They're not coming off. So those were made exclusively for this figure. Again, Mattel being notorious for reusing parts. So it's cool to see that. It's cool to see the sandaled feet. That's really unique to He-Man. These characters traditionally have like fuzzy boots. So to see like his toes sticking out, kind of impractical if you're in battle. So that really reveals just how confident this version of He-Man is going into fight Skeletor or D-Man or whoever he was fighting. Let's put the weapons in his hands and see how well he holds them for the sake of my display on the shelf. I like that the shield is a simple handle. There isn't like a hook for me to have him wear that shield as a bracelet, basically, as some of these figures have. So he's holding it firmly. Nice axe here. Yeah, that's nice. Simple. There is a place to insert, I would presume, the power sword, but he only came with these two weapons. So I guess that could be, if you borrow a sword or a weapon from another figure, you could put it in there. Now, of course, what's really important to mention is that this version of He-Man has black hair. He-Man, as we know, is a blonde. He has more fun. So in that spirit, here is an additional, I would suggest more traditional He-Man head. And what I like about this head is that the helmet has the same color scheme as He-Man's classic shield. So, you know, the guy likes to accessorize. He likes to match, and it's very clear here when you put that helmet on that everything coordinates beautifully, from the harness to the shield. Very warm tones here, very earth, a lot of earth tones here, but this is a barbarian. This isn't the He-Man that transforms into Prince Adam. This is the guy that wanders from the caves or the jungles or whatever in Eternia and saves the day and then leaves just as mysteriously. So I would say that this figure is super cool. And as a He-Man toy, how much fun is this? Now again, sword and sorcery as a genre has really waned in the last 40 years. I would say that, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but Masters of the Universe was probably its last gasp as far as mainstream appeal with young boys. I mean, hot on the heels of He-Man, you had Transformers and the rise of G.I. Joe and its version in the 80s. So you have military toys, you have technology and robot toys. When you think about the dominance of those two franchises, He-Man really is the dark horse in that way. Of course, you have Star Wars as well, which is pretty sci-fi tech. I would almost categorize that with Transformers as far as it's very vehicle-driven. And although those characters were kind of dressed down, because as much as that is futuristic-looking technology, that takes place in a galaxy far away, long, long ago, right? So I guess we're meant to believe that that galaxy it just exceeds ours as far as technology goes in its timeline, but in its development. But yeah, again, I would just say that He-Man is kind of a weird dark horse in that regard. So again, what I was getting at was having this figure on the pegs at a Target. Are kids snatching this up and thinking of it as He-Man, a character that they could fall in love with and play with like I did when I was a kid? Or is this mostly for me, the mid-40s guy that just remembers this stuff fondly? We know the answer to that question, I think. But man, how cool is this guy? With all your standard points of articulation and so on. You know, you could strike a pose, strike a battle pose. I think he will go on my shelves eventually with the Lords of Power figures that came out through Origins as well. So when all of these toys are opened, there's going to be a definitive kind of prototypical or pre-Turnia section that features variants like this that represent earlier versions of the characters. Again, the Lords of Power figures, the Green Goddess, and then these Sketchbook versions will all kind of cluster very nicely. And then the mainstream, previously released versions of these characters will have their own larger section. But I think that's the best way to display this stuff. One is a bit more historical, and the other is way more nostalgic. So, that said, Motu Origins Sketchbook Series He-Man, I believe still on the shelves as I post this, is definitely worth buying if you're into the history of this character, and if you're as excited about the movie's release as I am. What a great nod to where this character is in anticipation of where he's going. If you liked this video and you want to know a little bit more about the stuff I make, you could follow me on Instagram at AmazingAZComics. That's AmazingAZComics, where I post about the comics and toys I love, but also the comics and zines I make. I'd really appreciate it if you followed me there too. Until next time, when I grab another unopened toy here in my pile and I tell myself, you know what? Just open it. I will see you then. Thank you, everybody.